everyone, and welcome back to Alpine Intel's The Savvy Adjuster podcast, where we discuss some of the insurance-related topics important to adjusters with the experts who know them best. I'm your host, Senior Account Manager Chris Nichols. Now, if you didn't already know, Alpine Intel is dedicated to innovation across the property, auto, liability, and workers' comp insurance fields. Through our operating brands that cover all these areas and others, we are respected as an industry leader for not only our scale, but our track record for conducting expert, specialized, objective, and of course, accurate investigations. Today, our focus is on National Fire Experts, or NFE. Now, in addition to determining the most plausible origin and cause for fire investigations through our 11-step investigation process, NFE has a team of certified fire protection specialists who are instrumental in determining how prevention or notification systems may have failed during a fire. And joining us today are two of those certified fire investigators, Ted Forbes and Ryan Bain. Gentlemen, thank you for joining the Savvy Adjuster podcast today.
Thank you for having us.
Hey, Chris, how are you?
Well, I am great. And again, thank you for joining us. I'm excited about this episode. It's a topic that I've been curious about for a while. So really appreciate you lending your knowledge here. Now, a quick disclaimer, listener, before we jump in, each claim is unique. And on the podcast, we do kind of speak in general terms. That's why it's always important to get an expert assessment to make sure you have everything you need to make a settlement decision that accounts for all the facts related to each claim. Now, Ted and Ryan, before we get into talking about why certified fire protection specialists are critical to some fire investigations, we'd love to hear more about you. Ted, let's start with you. If you don't mind, can you let our listeners know a little bit about your background?
So I've been with National Fire Experts for 5 years and still currently am in the public sector. I work part-time with National Fire Experts, but I work full-time as a fire investigator. I've been doing fire investigations just about 20 years now. I focus solely on origin and cause most of the time, but I've been doing fire protection specialist investigations and failures for about 4.5 years now.
Well, very nice. And Ryan, same question to you. Would love to hear a little bit more about your background as well.
So just about 25 years in the fire service. A lot of it, about half of it in fire prevention. Investigations been doing for professionally for like the last 10 years or so. Pretty new to the CFPS, Certified Fire Protection Specialist stuff. Following in Ted's footsteps in that, trying to get to this program rolling out.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like between the two of you and your 45 years of total experience, I think we're in good hands today. So definitely thank you again for joining us. So Ted, would love to start with you and ask you what makes the CFPS credential different than other certified fire investigators that we have at NFE?
So the real big difference is with this certified fire protection specialist, we're looking at why a life safety system wasn't maintained, if it failed, why it failed. Also, we're evaluating if those life safety systems within a structure are adequate or were designed adequately for that system or for that structure as it is when it was built, but also as it's been maintained. As a fire protection specialist, you can evaluate that and use the codes and standards and the requirements local and nationally to evaluate that, as other fire investigators cannot.
That's perfect. Ryan, I'd be kind of curious to get your thoughts on that as well. Any other additional thoughts on how that CFPS credential would differ from, just a traditional fire investigator?
So the CFPS is recognized through the National Fire Protection Administration. There's not a whole lot of fire investigators that hold that certification. The national recognition from International Association of Fire Investigators and National Fire Investigators, both of those, that's kind of the common thread with fire investigators across the country. The CFPS, it shows to us shows that we are nationally recognized as being competent in evaluating these systems, and basically doing everything that Ted mentioned. Anything from making sure that the design is correct to um, making sure that it was maintained properly. So I don't think a lot of fire investigators across the country have that. If they have the ability, they don't have the certification. And I think, the background in fire prevention and the experience that we have between me and Ted, it's pretty valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. When you guys were giving your answers, which thank you for those, I was just thinking, I didn't know that, you can look at not only the origin cause of a fire, but how it may have been prevented or not prevented, right? And that's where you come in, looking at the alarm system, suppression systems, even I'm assuming the construction of the system, things like that. It's interesting to see that kind of service available as well. So, um,
So
Ted, did you? Yeah,
one of
Chris
the
is
selling points I think is behind this program is you can get an engineer to come in here and evaluate a fire suppression system, evaluate the alarm system, but they don't know fire. They don't know fire like we know it, and the fact it's going to be more cost effective to get somebody like with a CFPS in there than it is going to be to get an engineer to go in there and reevaluate the system. Plus, I don't think they're going to come back with the answers that the client's looking for. They're still going to have a fire investigator go out and correlate with a fire the engineers. So I feel like it's kind of a one-stop shop getting us out there, and whether it's virtual or they fly us to the scene, whatever the case may be. I think it's um like I said, a one-stop shop, and you're getting a lot more than just a fire investigator or an engineer out on site.
sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ryan, I'll stick with you for the next question here. When exactly during the claims process should an adjuster call for CFPS in addition to an origin and cause investigation?
I think our focus is probably mostly going to be on the commercial buildings with fire suppression systems involved with them, without um, without having kind of an idea of where this thing is headed as far as the investigation goes. Hopefully, we'll be able to, have our experts recognize when something is out of place. When we're doing the origin and cause out there. Um, we could step in at any time and be able to evaluate the systems, and we're just a phone call away basically. Um, for getting our insight on things.
Sure. And Ted, over to you. For kind of a follow-up question. Ryan touched on this. A lot of commercial locations are looked at. I'm kind of curious, any other certain types of properties or maybe just overall characteristics an incident would have to make a CFPS valuable?
sure, and Ryan's correct. A lot of commercial structures, but really any structure that has a fire suppression system, an alarm system, not just commercial buildings. That could be multifamily buildings, apartments, condos, where the fire suppression system or alarm system is throughout common areas. Also, any commercial restaurants, hood system, things like that. I recommend that the adjuster get us involved as early as possible. The earlier we are able to get out there and assist with that, with the origin and cause investigator, or just be engaged in that, it is vital to the whole investigation.
Sure. And we've had people from NFE on in the past, and they talk about, like you said, the time to site, the spoliation of evidence. It's very important for you to get there as soon as possible. They also shared stories about how they have go bags packed already, so they can, kind of pull it out of the closet and be ready at a moment's notice. So, um, Absolutely. Well, Ted, I will stick with you because we were kind of talking offline before we started the podcast about this next question. But sometimes an insurance professional handling a fire claim may not know all the details right away, right? So I'm curious, does a CFPS actually have to go on site to assist in a claim?
So ultimately, they don't. The way that we've set up our um, investigation process with NFE is we can have an origin and cause investigator out there and do a desk review of that investigation, especially um, if it's a claim where it's more of a fire investigation loss, potentially evaluating the effectiveness after the fact of a fire. I know I've done that a few times where an adjuster is asked, how is the effectiveness of something, and we can look at it and use other resources to evaluate that with the origin and cause expert, and then be able to provide them their report or a verbal report, either whatever they choose, allowing them to make their claim decisions.
Sure. And I would imagine being able to do it virtually cuts down on really the turnaround time for the report. You get that information back a little quicker instead of flying you from wherever you're located to the claim site and things like that. I'm sure it's a little more cost effective as well, I would imagine. So
Absolutely, cost effective, time effective.
sure.
Having a local origin and cause expert be able to be out there in a day or two versus travel. The time to report is hugely reduced.
Sure, absolutely. Ryan, I'm kind of curious to ask you this. So, when you are doing either an on-site or, as Ted was mentioning, a desktop review, what types of things are you looking at, and what kind of insights are you providing, in that report?
Well, like Ted mentioned earlier, we're looking at whether or not the system was designed properly for what the building was being used for. We're looking to make sure it was properly maintained, looking at our documents from the service companies, looking to make sure that say fire sprinklers weren't blocked, or um, even corrosion or anything like that may have affected the system. Also, we've actually even done I know Ted's done a couple of lightning strike incidents that you're reviewing. Last week I did a desk review on this, basically going, hey, why did the system fail? The system went offline on the 29th of the month, but on the 24th of the month, there were several lightning strikes in the area. We ended up looking at the fire alarm records from from the monitoring company, and finding out that correlating the times that the lightning strikes were, and also um, looking at what alarms were going off with the system. So that was an example of the part of a review that we do. Um, each system is going to be a little bit different. Each event's going to be a little bit different, but ultimately, it's about the performance and maintenance of the system, for the most part.
Sure.
And then we can correlate that with you know how the fire started, and even go into the prevention of it in the long run.
And right, I would love to know too, is there a different approach that you take for different systems when evaluating them? Like, is there a different way to approach a sprinkler system versus an alarm system, or are you pretty much following core principles and an outline process for both of those?
Well, ultimately, both of the systems should be tied together. If we have a sprinkler activation, the fire alarm is going to let us know, hopefully what time it went off. So we're going to want to review all of the records, as far as, whatever's available, looking at, all of the designs of the system, looking at, the maintenance of all of it. Because everything works interchangeably. Everything is kind of tied together. The building design, the fire protection systems, all of that stuff is supposed to work hand in hand with each other.
Yep, makes total sense. Well, Ted, I'll kick it back over to you. And Ryan mentioned sprinkler systems, right? A lot of people are familiar with sprinkler systems. We see them throughout our day to day. But I'm curious if you could speak to some other automatic extinguishing systems and what types of failures you typically see from those.
Sure. I mean, there's lots of different systems. At least locally where I see them, we have everything from a pre-engineered installed system in a hood system in any commercial cooking operation. You have not just water-based systems, you have dry fire suppression systems, a lot of times in unclimate controlled spaces such as attics, commercial buildings like apartments or warehouses where you may not have the maintenance of a heating and air conditioning system, or if you're like a cold storage area where it's designed to be cold. So those have different requirements for maintenance and accessibility. And then we look at things also, there's VESPA systems, which are very complex air monitoring systems where they're using those in computer-based buildings or data storage areas where it's sampling the air and then determining if there's a fire just by the products of combustion and soot within the air. Super complex and super sensitive systems. So those are even another aspect of it. But probably the biggest one that we're all seeing is commercial cooking systems and ventilation systems. The ventilation system is tied in with that commercial cooking system, and that suppression system and the ventilation system have very strict requirements for what is being produced on it, what kind of food is being cooked on it. And it's pretty standard across the United States on cleaning and maintenance standards for them. So that's one that we always are seeing. And one of the bigger things is you may have a stovetop fire just from a boil over of grease or something where it catches fire, but that fire may reveal that, the ventilation of the suppression system that was designed to suppress that fire wasn't maintained or inspected properly. So we're finding a lot of that too.
You mentioned something interesting too. I guess I always, being the novice that I am and not a professional like the both of you are, always think of suppression systems as maybe using water in general, right? But you mentioned a dry extinguishing system. Can you speak a little bit to that, kind of how that would differ? I mean, I'm assuming it's dry versus wet, but can you speak to a little bit about that type of suppression system?
Sure, there is water-based dry system. Basically, the pipes are filled with air to keep them from freezing. And then there is other systems where they add things such as antifreeze or other suppression chemicals. But the most common is a dry system where it is charged with air, it's maintained with air, and then if there is a activation of the system through one of the heads, the air is evacuated very quickly, and then the system is charged with water to
Gotcha.
suppress the system. It is where usually used in spaces that cannot be kept above 40 degrees Fahrenheit.
I see. To prevent freezing, I'm
Exactly.
assuming.
Yeah.
Yep. Gotcha. Interesting. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing those additional extinguishing systems. Ryan, would love to bounce this next question off of you because it's an interesting one. Can things like locations or codes impact your findings?
Absolutely. I mean, it's going to be one of the things that we're going to need to research while we're doing a CFPS project, simply because we need to know what jurisdiction has adopted what codes and what they're doing as far as local ordinances and things that impact the systems. You can always there's basically two model codes that we follow. One of them is the International Fire Code, and the other one is NFPA 1, which they're very similar in the concept, but you can always the jurisdiction that adopts these, they can always go stricter, but they can't go less than what the model codes require. So for instance, I'm over here in California, and when a fire system goes down, the codes basically mandate that, you know, a fire watch goes into place. The AHJ, authority having jurisdiction, should do that. Which the NFPA, it empowers the AHJ to do that, but it doesn't require it, which is, you know, if we're going to go out there and make recommendations to the insurance companies, going out there and saying, hey, you know, you need to require a fire watch versus having, you know, having it be up to the authority having jurisdiction, it's a big difference. You know, the word requirement versus recommendations, big difference.
Sure. And Ted, kind of same question to you in your you know, in your experience, what have you seen? How are codes different in certain areas, and how would they, you know, how have they impacted your findings in the past?
Like Ryan was speaking about, not only local code but state code, and then even as boiling it down even to the town or city county codes. So they could be much stricter. They could require different styles of life safety system for a certain building, and standoffs for buildings, you know, distance separating these. So every time that we do an investigation, we need not only establish the code and the standard that the building is maintained under, but also the year that the building was built, because that changes the code and standard. If the building was built in 1950 and it hasn't been adjusted and it hasn't changed ownership or the commodities that are being used in it, that building was maintained under the 1950s fire code. And that's going to be significantly different than the 2024 fire code, or the code that was adopted by that local jurisdiction. Some of those other aspects is systems age out. So suppression systems, fire alarm systems all have testing and maintenance required for the age of the system. And some of them, again, I'm going to fall back onto the ventilation and suppression systems within restaurants. They've aged out now twice recently, where they've changed the suppression chemical. So you may have a system that is still viable, but if they cannot find those repair pieces, then your owner is responsible for replacing that system. That can be very costly. But if they are not maintaining those repairs, it makes the system not conforming. So you may have an issue where you had a fire, and because of the non-conforming system, it didn't suppress the fire that could have been easily maintained.
Sure. So how exactly do you go about obtaining that information on the building? And I'm going back to what you said about the desktop review service, and Ted, will stick with you on this one. Since you could do a lot of this virtually, what do you need to have sent to you, or what do you look at to help you kind of formulate what's going on at a claim site?
So anytime we evaluate a building, we're looking at not only the history of the building, meaning the year it was built, the systems within the building, any change of occupancy or commodity. So ownership changes, commodity changes. We're going to get as much of that information as we can from the adjuster, from historic building records, through tax assessments, through building licenses, through inspections by the municipality that's local. But then we're going to, you know, speak with that owner, find out the owner of the property, find out, you know, what are they doing in that system, what process, what are they doing? Are they storing cardboard boxes, or is it a commercial structure where they're manufacturing something? Those all change that. And then what they're doing now and how long they've had that property. Then we'll reflect back to fire suppression records, life safety system tests from the local businesses that do it, the fire suppression companies, the alarm companies that do that yearly inspection and testing and maintenance. Those are all records that are required to be kept by not only the building owner, but also the company that's doing those tests. And if we need to, we can rely on those companies who have the knowledge of those systems and those buildings to go out and evaluate and test those systems and give us a test so we can use that to evaluate exactly if the system is functioning correctly.
Sure. It sounds like a lot of factors go into these investigations, and it's good because we have a lot of adjusters listening to the podcast. Obviously, the Savvy Adjuster podcast, so it's good for them to know when implementing a CFPS into a claim site what kind of information they should have ready and available to provide to you, so you can make the most accurate decisions, in the report. So yeah, no, great. Great insight on that. Ryan, I'm kind of curious too, and you hope a claim just kind of settles itself, but if it ends up in litigation, can you speak a little bit about how CFPS can help either through that report or as a witness?
Yeah, I mean, we just like the investigators that we use routinely. I mean, it's having an expert go out there and be able to assess the whole picture. Looking at, okay, did the property owner maintain? Did, what codes there were in place? And going back to everything that we've talked about on this, we, courtroom litigation, if it comes down to it, we're going to be sitting there and doing what we normally do as a fire investigator, making sure that they have an expert on site to be able to on site or reviewing a desk review. I mean, we can always throw this information at our fire investigator that's on site or the adjuster that needs the information.
Absolutely. Ted, I would love to also get your thoughts on that question because I think it's an important one, showing the support that NFE not only gives you with providing an actionable report, but throughout the entire claim process, right? Even if it, like I said, does go to litigation. Anything to add as far as how a CFPS can, help as a witness, if something does go to litigation?
Sure. So some of the things that we can also provide are a validation of the origin and cause on why, for whatever reason, we had a fire in one area that potentially spread through out a building, and why those fires developed the way they did. And that may be because of a failure of a life safety system. That may be because of modifications to the building and or the commodity that's within the building. So if we have an owner that has gone through a warehouse and cut large holes in the building, we could assist that origin and cause expert with speaking on building codes and speaking on how those modifications to that building had an effect on the spread growth of products of combustion and fire. And using not only the building codes and standards, but also the development of progression of fire through mathematical equations, we can show some of that stuff and even use it to test the hypothesis that the fire investigators that come up with, not only doing a physical test, but we can also assist them in cognitive testing, actually being able to determine how much energy was passed through a certain area of a wall or something like that, and go, yes, it is possible to have a fire that started on the backside of the wall because of this. So having those things to take to, if a claims goes to litigation, are vital, not only for that origin and cause expert who goes, yeah, I mean, I had a fire in this section of the building and it started over here. Why is that? How, using that why and showing through building code and standards and potential cognitive testing, we can show why and explain how that happened. And put it on paper so that not only can the adjuster see that, but also any people involved in litigation, attorneys and juries, can see the why and potentially a willful act or just a neglect of something and the cause of that.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, and I think all those examples both of you gave just drive home the fact why it's so important to partner with an experienced company like NFE who has experts with years and years and years of knowledge. So, no, great examples of how we can kind of support post report as well if it does go to litigation. So, as we near the end of the episode, we always like to finish with real life examples from experience our guests have had. And obviously, you guys have had a lot of experiences over your years and years doing this. Ryan, let's start with you. If you don't mind, I would love to hear either about an investigation you've done or just kind of some real world examples that were particularly interesting or complex, in the CFPS space, if you will.
Okay. So I think the CFPS goes hand in hand with the fire prevention world, which is where I spent a good deal of my career. Um, I like to give this example because it's very real world. Had a building that was designed. This is when I was a fire inspector. I had a building that was designed as a tenant improvement. A tenant moves in there. They are a car cover distribution center. And it doesn't sound like it's very hazardous, but until you look at what kind of material these car covers are made out of, it's polyethylene glycol. Basically it's almost as dangerous as gasoline. Stored in solid form. And to the average business owner, to the average person, hey, they want to make their business successful. They're going to take the cheapest place that they can. So this guy moves into his business into this building, and he hadn't done his due diligence with the city and letting them know, the county, the fire department, letting them know what they're doing. They didn't really do any tenant improvements themselves. They just moved into a spec suite. They had in-rack storage of these car covers that the fire suppression system wasn't going to be able to keep up with if there ever was a fire. So in the interest of life safety and property preservation, I was able to go in there, work with the owner, let them know and inform them why the fire department at that point was kind of coming down on them, and work out solutions to be able to get that problem taken care of. So, you look at the fire sprinkler systems, and they are designed for what type of commodity the building is designed for. So if you're storing, hazardous chemicals, flammable liquids, things like that, that fire suppression system is going to be designed a lot more than, an office building. So you have to look at, when we're doing design review on these things, you're looking at the sprinkler density, how much water is going to be coming out of those pipes at what pressure. And that's pretty paramount for protecting what hazard is inside there. So if you move into a building that's supposed to be office space, and you're storing cardboard boxes on top of cardboard boxes, in this case car covers, it's one of the reviews that as the local authority having jurisdiction, they don't always get to. This is a non-required inspection for the authorities having jurisdiction. They basically only inspect what they have to a lot of the time if they're short-staffed. So even us as the CFPS for NFE, we could probably even go in and do inspections virtually for risk assessment for these buildings, and able to get to these things before something bad could happen.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've learned a lot in this episode. One thing that I just learned when you were giving your example is that not all fire suppression systems are equal, which I assumed, that you could just, kind of plop one into a business, it would be fine. And if there are any business owners listening, it's always good to evaluate, like you said, what you're actually hoping to protect in that building when designing and when making sure that your fire suppression system meets the needs of the contents that you're housing there. So interesting example there. Ted, would love a little bit of an example maybe of an inspection investigation again that you've done. Maybe stands out, interesting, complex. Would love to hear your thoughts as well.
Sure, Chris. One of the inspections I did recently was a fire on the exterior of a building, and the adjuster actually asked, because of some language in their policy, about maintenance of fire suppression systems and life safety systems. So I was tasked with doing a hazard assessment of the building, not only the area of origin and the damage to the building, but of the whole building and its life safety system, including fire alarm systems, any fire suppression systems, fixed and mobile fire extinguishers, things like that. Through that, discovered that there was some issues within those life safety systems and maintenance, and not even just like you said, not even just the building occupancy, but the commodity that they were storing and the hazard risk assessment for what they were storing in that warehouse versus what they actually were designed to be storing. So I was able to go back to the adjuster and say, hey, we've got these things that were discovered and issues found, and they were able to work with the claim there. Another one, a great example for you is working through litigation. I was brought in by another fire investigator, origin cause expert, about a fatality fire in a commercial deli. And the question was brought to me was, can a smoldering fire occur within a wall, and how would it have gotten there? And doing some cognitive testing was able to show that a process they were using to sanitize the deli with a flame producing device actually caused a smoldering fire within the walls that hours later burned down a building. Just that cognitive testing alone brought to the district attorney, allowed them to move forth and have the claim, or actually the litigation, dismissed. So working with them not only, allowed the origin cause expert to solidify or verify their cognitive examples. On paper, it could show not only the origin cause expert, but the litigation experts on how that fire could have occurred.
Yeah. Well, both of you great examples of how it is important to bring a CFPS into certain claims. Certainly can be very valuable. And speaking of valuable, thank you both for all the valuable information today. I learned a ton. I guarantee our listeners did. So just wanted to say a big thanks again for joining us on the Savvy Adjuster podcast here today.
Thanks for having us, Chris.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us.
Of course. And of course, thanks to our listeners. The show notes, you can click on those. They include additional resources about certified fire protection specialists and, of course, national fire experts. You can also explore a variety of insurance-related resources or even submit an assignment to us for any of our Alpine Intel brands at our website, which bookmark it if you can, is alpineintel.com. And finally, make sure to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss a valuable episode like the one we just got done with. Thanks again for listening, everybody, and we will see you next time.